All right, guys, this draft was for all the cojones, right? We got top four. This is arguably one of the strongest matchups of the entire year. We've got such a dynamic and back and forth draft, challenging different styles. This draft is not about who can catch the other's mistakes or can see the other fumbling. It's about playing dirty, having the trump cards in certain slots when you don't expect it. And both teams obviously super capable and having different drafting dynamics and having so many different strategies to deploy in this whole series. And it's just beautiful the way that it ends up panning out and like the tug and the back and forth of pressure. And I want to share that with you guys today. So game one, let's start off with like a little bit, the first thing to keep in note here is that Gen G keep basically a lot of the OP champs open, and this is like an evolution of the red side's draft where there's a lot of decent picks to kind of take at this point, right? There's a lot of decent B1s. I wouldn't say anything absolutely game breaking or Z tier. So usually it's about whatever red team is deciding to let open because blue side is usually not going to be able to. And the T1 bands, they're nothing crazy, I would say. The Smolder band is a setup against the R1, R2. It's set up for the Yone B1. So Gen G are just down to take it. And then the other bands are more so also for that R1, R2 slot with the prevention of the Nidalee pick with pairing with Canyon and whatever other champions they're willing to set them up on, and so on and so forth. So you can see Yone B1 opens, but then Gen G actually takes Skarner back because everything's open. So the way this plans out is, they take Skarner. T1 actually go for Ashe Renata on 2-3 because the Ashe has been open. And you could argue Renata is probably just like a really solid pick overall pairing with the Ashe. I almost want to say it's like Kalista Renata in a way where it's pretty ideal to pick them together, but Ashe still favors really well with other combos if you really need to. I would put it that way. And this could be because Gen G had the Sylas prepared as well. This is a really good Sylas angle, by the way, because we're in a meta where there's so many champions that Sylas can benefit from an ultimate standpoint. And it just further increases the value. And he has decent matchups into a lot of the primary mid laners that have been picked up a lot. So, namely the Ahri that has been really, really prominent. It even solves a lot of Sylas's issues with his champion identity, as well as actually favoring not too badly into the Yone, because of the fact that he can take the ult, he can do E2 into R1, so therefore it gives a lot of access to the backline. So it's not necessarily a bad pick at all. It also even disincentivizes other picks, right? We have worlds where we got the Rumbles of the world, the Nocturnes, the Vi's, right? It makes it really hard to go for those champions because, Sylas is just going to cosplay those champions, and it's going to be a lot harder for T1 to kind of like, it's something to chew on, right? So there's a lot of pressure here, and this is where the Ziggs angle comes in on R4. I actually really like this. Look at this tug. Okay, so T1 generally they're like, okay, they've got the really good front to back here. They gave the Ashe. If it were me, I probably would have taken the Ashe. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think Skarner Ashe 1-2 would have been a little bit better, but I digress. This could be a stylistic thing from Gen G, and they go for the Ziggs on 4. It could be the reason this Ziggs could really be the reason why they actually let this Ashe through, because stylistically they could think that if we play the Ziggs style and we play the poke style and let them go FTB, then we can probably go for it, and this prevents the Vi from going in. This creates the value in the Vi pick as well, so it gives another pivot for T1 on the 4-5. So very interesting back and forth here, right? You see a lot of like prevention and a lot of back and forth in terms of the matchups, and I would consider this draft pretty even. The only confusing part is like I would say T1's draft is a little bit more like tradition. It goes a little bit off the beaten path in terms of what the champions want to do normally, but it doesn't mean that they're not good at like playing forward and getting picks where they want to, right? Gragas is typically better when he fares against like defensive comps or fares into defensive comps, where he's peeling for his team, but you don't really want to do that against Ziggs. But when you have like guaranteed access with like the Vi Yone, it's really, really good. So both teams have their separate win cons, and it's not like the draft is completely blown open from one team or the other, right? You can clearly tell from some of these team fights. It's like, especially on this one on Baron, it's beautiful from T1 the way they executed it. Let me see. I believe I gotta find it. Around here? Yes. So Essentially, T1 start Baron, they trade for Dragon, and look at this. You still have so much access, right? It's not really a big deal in terms of like what the team is able to do. And sure, it's like a little bit hard for them to play out the fights. It's gonna be tight. Of course, it's tight. It's Gen G, right? It's top Korean team. They know like how these comps are gonna function and the weaknesses. So they just gotta play out of their minds in order to get there. So really, really well done. Game 2. This one is really funny because Gen G ended up going for blue side this time. And I want to point your attention to the blue side bans, which are basically just racist, right? Like, look at this stuff. We got Kalista, Xayah, Ashe, right? Triple AD carry ban. And what this does is very interesting, right? So T1 go for the route of just banning a lot of the OPs, and then they give up Skarner, which is totally chill in my book. I think it's not a big deal. Skarner is like somewhat playable as well, like it's not like you feel like you can't do anything into Skarner. Do you know what I mean? And this is where T1 actually feel obligated, because there's so many AD carry bans in the first phase, to actually go the Caitlyn 1, right? This is very interesting from T1 to go Caitlyn 1-2. This could be because, let's say, for example, T1 feel like Guma is going to lose like every AD carry in the game by the time he goes to second phase if they don't pick in this phase right now. And if you don't pick on the 1-2, Gen G is going to take another AD carry on 2-3, right? So they're probably pretty scared, if I were to say so myself, right? It's a quite scary thing. They also go for Kindred really early here, which is very surprising. They could have went for the Jax or the Ahri themselves. It could be because they wanted to go for like a stylistic choice. Like they could have paired Caitlyn with Ahri. We can go Caitlyn Jax or something like that. It's not too bad. And they'll go Braum on 3, which is another interesting pick, right? There's a lot of really interesting combos that I don't know if it strikes me as the same like sort of commanding dynamic that T1 are known for, right? We love the Caitlyn combos here. And we've seen Guma on Caitlyn fare really well, but it's like really at what cost, right? You're revealing a lot about your comp very early on. It's just like the pacing of the game is just gonna be a slow front to back. There's so much you can play through the Caitlyn and get the Kindred, but it's a very it's a very bitch draft, if I'm gonna be honest with you, right? And honestly, Gen G, they sign up for it. They're just like, yeah, whatever, it's chill, bro. Like, it's surprising to me that they actually just go forward into the T1 comp anyway. That's like kind of backward. And the only reason that I think this is not bad is because actually T1 picked so little pressure on other parts of the map in terms of like early game creativity and setting themselves up for future plays, right? I'd say slot for slot, Gen G have just a lot better champs, and it really seems a little bit awkward in this one from T1 just because of that priority. They probably panicked a little bit with AD carry bans, and they just felt obligated. This could have been a prepared thing for them as well. They're like, if they go like this, then we're going to go for this route. And if it doesn't work, we're going to throw away that route, right? So T1 are back on blue. They're like, all right, no more. We're going to ban the Yone too, and we're going to switch it up a bit, right? Because we're going to go for Ashe opener this time. So we're going to ban the Yone. They go Jax Ahri. Slowly chill. Renata Gragas. So it's very similar to the first draft, I would say. But except that I think that if you're going to go Gragas anyway, the Jax ban in the first game wasn't too necessary because it would have been a fair matchup anyway. It just would have been better in like the sort of lane swap scenario. But I think this is totally great from T1. Gen G go for the cop-out Ezreal pick on 4. And then this is when T1 do a beautiful sort of like switcheroo. Because they go for the Ezreal on 4 and punish it with the Akali Vi, right? So they know that it's relatively well known that when you have a comp like this and you have champs like this, it's a little bit hard for Gen G to kind of put forward into them. They have so much peel. They're playing perfectly into T1's conditions. It's kind of awkward, you're not you don't want to maximize the value of these champs. It's going to be really hard to play, right? So you want to go Ezreal, right? You could go Ezreal Ziggs here. Both of them are fine. Boom. I think it's like they misidentified the strategy they're going for and the importance of these second phase bans in order to set themselves up for that as well, right? If they want to go for this poke angle, which I do think is correct, they can go Ziggs here instead as well. then they should ban out things like the Vi. Maybe the Nocturne was a takeaway as well, but I don't really think so. They could have banned like Vi Nocturne, then go Ziggs on 4. Then it prevents this from being as viable. I think they could still go Akali plus aggressive picks, but with something like Vi, which guarantees that there's going to be issues every now and then, that's a little bit different, right? It creates a different dynamic. Like when you're the Ezreal and you know every few minutes you're going to die because of this, yeah, it's a little bit hard to play. So really good pivot from T1. And no one plays Akali, by the way. No one plays Akali anymore. It's just a very specific pick prepared for this series, and it just shows the confidence from T1, right? They have the unique pivots. They know. There's one level where you know what's good. You have to have a complete, comprehensive understanding of what's good in order to ascend beyond that and then gain your mix-ups. That's basically that's a demonstration of your comprehension in these scenarios, right? Same thing, Gen G, they go for Ashe. At this point, we're 4 games in. There's only going to be minor adjustments in terms of like what's going to be picked in draft. And this time, Gen G nuke it and they go for the Canyon Italy angle, baby. So they actually sack the Skarner and the Jax, and they try to set up Canyon as much as possible. I do think it's always a good thing to try to nuke the pacing if you want to try to catch the enemy off guard, because if they know stylistically that you're lost in the other way, and you'll generally know by feeling the game, then it's time to switch it up, So Gen G they go for this comp, and I think it's not bad. Generates decent lanes, but it's just like it was too expensive in the sense that Gen G were not willing to budge on these 2 bans here the entire series. So in exchange, they just give T1 a lot of the broken champs. And they also leave themselves open to the Pyke punish and prevents a lot of their early game chaos, right? This is a perfect example of T1 hedging against that. They save support for 5, where most teams would just like slave support, pick them on 2-3, put them on engage or peel or something, and it's just so much nicer when your team is on the same page and you give them the resources they need to succeed. Look, Pyke's been picked 1 time this entire world. You know why? It's been picked by Keria. Only a player like this would be willing to bust out a pick like this in this scenario. This is what I'm talking about. It's not about meta slaving. It's about adapting to the needs of meta and building out what you want. And that was the lesson from this series. And it was a beautiful series overall. I think from a draft perspective, especially, I think it's always really cool to see what teams come up with. And you can it was just, the results are basically like speak for themselves, right? Yes, like players can pilot certain things and they can, work with certain things, but it's all about setting themselves up for success, giving them the champions they need to succeed and the confidence to do so. And I think this is a great example of that. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I'll catch you in the next one. So yeah.